Hi, everyone. My name is Ranjit Nair, and I'm the president of Stanley Black & Decker's infrastructure business. I also serve as an executive sponsor of our Asian Heritage Network Employee Resource Group, a community that encourages culture, connection, and development by embracing our Asian heritage. I'm honored to be partnering with SASE, and I'm privileged to be part of this professional development webinar series hosted by Stanley Black & Decker. Diversity, equity, and inclusion is a cornerstone of our company and a personal passion of mine. Across our organization, we firmly believe together we are more and are committed to prioritizing DEI in everything we do, between holding DEI workshops, having meaningful conversations, and pursuing ambitious goals to further drive DEI. It's fantastic to see SASE's commitment to the advancement of scientists and engineers of Asian heritage, including this dynamic webinar series that encourages your professional growth and development. Our team is looking forward to furthering our relationship with SASE, including attending this year's Women's Leadership Conference and having members of our own Stanley Black & Decker team graduate from the Top Gun Leadership Academy. Thank you to the SASE team for your partnership, and on behalf of Stanley Black & Decker, we hope you enjoy today's session.
Hello there, this is Parag Madawar. I'm the Director of Professional Programs here at SASE. Thank you all for joining us. We've got close to 60 people and counting, climbing, wonderful numbers, wonderful participation today. Let me run you through a little bit before we get to our main event. Really pleased to be here to lead the SASE Pro program. This is our monthly webinar series, and for many of you, this may be an introduction to SASE Pro. So I want to do a brief top line of what SASE Pro does so that you are well aware of why you're here and who you're here with. So the problem that we are trying to solve is what we call the Asian leadership gap. Data shows that Asians are 50% less likely to get promoted to middle management versus our Caucasian peers. And we believe, based off of our research, that there are 4 common factors leading to this: lack of political and organizational savvy, cultural deference to authority, ineffective communication and influencing skills, and finally, an aversion to risk-taking. The challenge as we see it is really there's 3 key barriers. One is awareness of even these reasons, awareness that there's even a leadership gap to begin with. The model minority myth is pervasive, and many in society, including many in our own community, our own Asian community, believe everything's fine. And so first is we've got to know that there's a problem to even tackle. Second is how to tackle it. What we have learned is that leadership skills isn't the same as learning math or physics off of a YouTube video. It takes a little bit of practice, takes a little context, takes some feedback loop and so forth, and has to be delivered in a way that it lands. And what we've found is that Asian audiences with an Asian trainer is a much higher possibility of success for transformation. Lastly, what we face, and most Asian ERGs and companies face, is that Asian development is a relatively lower priority on the list, and that comes from funding as well as just awareness and championing and so forth like that. So what we have done at SASE Pro is we pulled together lots and lots of executives and ERG leaders and companies. Many of you came from those companies to collaborate to design and deliver programs that everybody wants, but at a scale that makes sense, and partner with trainers along the way. Our national conference each year is our signature program. We just finished our Women's Leadership Conference a couple weeks ago. And then year-round, we have programs like this, our webinar series. This is an ongoing free series featuring our training partners or interviews with executives. Happens roughly once every 4 weeks. The recordings are posted on our website for at least 2 months, more if the trainer prefers. You can stay informed by just watching our website or joining, following us on LinkedIn is the greatest way. Additionally, by attending this webinar. You registered during the registration process. You were asked whether or not you want to join our newsletter. You would get a quarterly newsletter from us regarding our activities coming up. So with that, let me introduce our speaker today, Neelu Kaur. Neelu is going to talk to us about Raised in the We, Thrive in the I, based off of her wonderful book right here, Be Your Own Cheerleader. It sometimes shows up depending on all the, yes, Neelu has a better picture in hers. But, really pleased to have Neelu here with us. Real quick on logistics. We're going to have a brief presentation from Neelu, but the bulk of this conversation is really going to be a moderated Q&A. So as ideas or thoughts come to you, please toss them into the chat, and Neelu and I will talk and incorporate it from there. So thank you very much, Neelu. Let me stop sharing and turn this over to you.
Thank you. And I will share my slides. Okay. So yes, Parag did a great job of introducing himself, introducing SASE. I'm Neelu. And yeah, so let's jump right in. So my book really focuses on thriving in the North American workplace. And one of the basic tenets that I talk about is a concept. It comes from Hofstede's cultural dimension. So on the bottom of the screen, you will see that there's a website, and you can go to this website, and there are a total of 5 dimensions, intercultural dimensions that Hofstede talks about. And the one that I really want to focus on today, and that Parag and I are going to talk about in detail, is called individualism versus collectivism. And so what that really means is that in individualistic societies, there is a preference for a loosely knit social framework in which individuals are expected to take care of only themselves and their immediate family, versus collectivism, which is a preference for a tightly knit social framework in which individuals can expect their relatives or members of a particular in-group to look after them in exchange for unquestioning loyalty. So as you probably are guessing, just based on these definitions, where do you think all Asian cultures fall in? They fall in collective cultures, collectivism. And North America, European countries fall under individualistic, individualism. So that can pose a problem, especially when we are taught not to talk about ourselves, our accomplishments. We're taught to, stay under the radar, do good work, and the work will speak for itself. That is a recipe for disaster in corporate America, as you probably already know. And so I just want to draw some attention to the differences. And you'll notice that one of the main differences is in individualistic cultures, the focus is on I. If you notice, the use of the letter I and the word I in English is so prevalent, versus if you think about the languages that you speak at home or with your families, you probably don't say I a whole lot, right? We tend to use collective language, especially around group harmony, and that's across the board of all cultures that fall under the AAPI umbrella. So that could be whether you're Japanese, whether you're Indian, whether you're Pakistani, wherever you are under the AAPI umbrella, the common thread is that we come from these collective cultures. So in individualistic cultures, the task comes first, and the relationship typically comes second. In collective cultures, relationships come first and the task comes second. Competition is viewed as healthy in individualistic societies, whereas in collective societies, it can feel threatening, especially to the family unit, right? So the motto for individualistic societies is that confrontation can do no harm and can actually sometimes be healthy, whereas with collective cultures, harmony is really focused on the group. So even if people disagree, they should maintain superficial harmony, or the group will be weakened and fall apart. And you probably can relate to this from your own upbringing with your families. I don't know about you, but I was told just to, not draw attention to myself, to stay under the radar. Like, you don't want to stick out in any way. And as you know, again, that does not work in corporate America. So I decided to choose some countries that fall under the AAPI umbrella, just to show you how different it is, right? So if you look at the US, this means that the US is the most individualistic culture compared to China, India, and Japan. And if you notice, China is the least individualistic. And then there are other countries. So we have Bangladesh, Philippines, Vietnam, again, all fall under AAPI, mapped up against the individualistic US. You notice here that Bangladesh is the lowest, meaning it's the most collective. And then Pakistan, South Korea, Thailand. And here you notice that Pakistan is the most collective. It's 14. So these, if you belong to any of these countries or cultures, you probably feel like you might be challenged in speaking about yourself, your credentials, and that's perfectly okay. It's because we were raised in a culture where it was more about group harmony, right? So I just wanted to share a little bit about the research for the we versus the I, and now Parag and I are going to talk a little bit more about what that actually looks like in a day-to-day basis.
Yeah. Thank you, Neelu. That's fascinating. From a country standpoint, I had always assumed that South Asian culture was relatively consistent across that subcontinent. And to see such a difference between Pakistan and India, which for the longest time were one and the same country, both with, heavy British influence, that struck me as really odd. Super odd there. And so, yeah, thank you for sharing that information, that data. When we think about, the culture within the US, and transitioning our lives and our careers here, whether we were born here or whether we immigrated directly, how have you seen this actually play out in your career? Where has it shown up as like smacked you upside the face?
Yes, exactly. I would say I absolutely sucked at self-advocacy. I still struggle with it. It feels viscerally uncomfortable to talk about myself and my accomplishments. So one thing I do on a regular basis is I really think of, like, if you think of a speedometer on a car, there one side is we and one side is I. So just having this awareness that it's on me, the onus is on me to dance between the two. So for example, when I am on a business development call for my business, I'm going to have to turn up the I. I'm going to have to talk about myself, my credentials, my accomplishments. And similarly for the folks here who are in organizations, when you are in a performance review conversation, when you're talking about promotion, right? Like these are times when you want to turn up the I dial, where you want to talk about yourself, your accomplishments. And then, for example, when I'm brought in as a consultant to a team, let's say I'm coaching an executive team, I'm going to focus more on the we. I'm going to use language like our shared goals, our desired outcomes, right? Like everything's about the group. And so just knowing that there's this dial. And so all of you are in organizations, are in teams. It's, if you start to think about when you have to turn up the I, when you have to turn up the we, it helps sort of, first, it brings it to the awareness level that, yes, I have to dance between the two. But secondly, it helps us sort of like flex the muscle, because we have to continuously do this in order for us to feel comfortable, because it feels so alien to us.
Yeah. Yeah, then that's fascinating about, are there certain contexts in which you should be on one side versus the other? And you mentioned within performance reviews, heck, I think even Asians in general, when they're writing a resume out, really struggle with even saying I versus the team or we, right, or whatnot, right? Right. In cases where clearly self-advocacy is incredibly important, but even struggling to do it there, where it's not like somebody's going to hear it. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. And I actually have a chapter in my book. It's called Being a Part of and Apart From. So you want to be a part of a team, but you also want to be apart from them, because otherwise, if you're not highlighting your contributions, you're going to be overlooked for promotion. You will be overlooked for increases in salary. And these are all things that Asians suffer with, whether you're South Asian or East Asian. These are common characteristics. And I actually believe it has a lot to do because of the fact that either we are from those cultures or we were raised by people from those cultures. And so they were just, it's something that they didn't model for us because that's not what they learned doing. So this is not about pointing fingers and saying that way is wrong and our way is right, or vice versa. It's really saying, okay, I have the ability to dance between the two. So I'm Asian, but I live in the US. So I have the ability, the onus is on me to dance between the two, to dance between the we and the I.
Gotcha. So can you say any more about, did you have any specific aha moments within your career, like any stories from your, actually, yes. I think even from your book, you actually had a couple.
I have so many. And the one that pops up in my mind the most is, so in 2013, I was working at a large financial services company, very large financial services company, and they had a huge downsizing. And I was there to coach all of the technologists and train them. And I remember when I was called into the conference room, they told me, we're going to let you go. I went back to my desk and I looked around, and the folks that were still in their chairs, they were not people of color. They were not Asians. It was mostly, to me, Caucasians, whether it was male, female. And I don't know if it was bias. I will never know, but I know at that point that I definitely was, not part of the in group. Like, it felt like the people that were there were part of a clique that I just didn't get the memo about. So that was the time when I realized, like, hey, I probably could have done a better job with self-advocating for myself throughout my tenure there. I just really didn't know how to do that. I didn't know what to say to my manager. I didn't know how to have the conversation. So that was one time where it just hit me right in the face that, you know what, Neelu, you really suck at this and you need to get better at self-advocacy.
I found it interesting in your book as well. You mentioned an example where someone was taking credit for your work, right? And I have to admit, I've been lucky in that, I worked for Procter & Gamble for 20 years, and I didn't see that at all, that type of backstabbing. But I read about this nonstop, and I think there's a couple of different. So even within our U.S. culture, there's a broad spectrum. Right. There's a really broad spectrum. And I think part of it is also geographical within the station, within the nation. Right. You and I both, we share our educational background. You went to NYU for undergrad and Columbia for grad school, and I did the opposite. And so I'm very familiar with there is a style from New York. Right. There is definitely a style. But growing up in the Midwest, at Procter, at least, there was rarely were people actually taking credit for other people's work. And so I was really, I'm always caught off guard a little bit when I read about these stories of that type of thing. And so I think I've been super fortunate that way. However, certainly within performance review time, and importantly within when the ratings were coming out and the bosses, that tier of bosses is really trying to figure out, okay, who are our 1 rated, who are our 3 rated, 1 being good, 3 being poor. Without that self-advocacy, Asians didn't bubble to the top because we didn't do that well, even though we were outperforming. And even though, and another part of that was we would rarely tell our manager, I want to be promoted. Please put me in position so that I can be promoted and give me those skills. We assumed that the system would take care of us. So
Right. Just like in our collective cultures, we assume our family will take care of us, right? Like there's just this embedded assumption. And so we take that forward into our professional lives. And I don't know, I maybe it's just me and I've had these like terrible experiences, but I always felt like I was out on like a boat alone in corporate America. And so never really felt like I got the support. And I'm glad that you did in your organization, because I think that's very rare. I know I was in consulting, I was in financial services, I was in tech. And so I feel like in certain industries, and of course, certain parts of the country, New York being one of the most cutthroat, I found myself in situations. And again, I don't know if it's because I'm a woman and you're a man, there could be some element of that going on as well. Sure. But I definitely feel like from all of the women that I've been coaching and the men that I've coached that are in these spaces, I find that women struggle a lot with this, and then specifically Asian women.
Yeah. No, yeah. I can see that. I could see that definitely happening. So, folks, if you have any questions, feel free to toss them into the chat. But moving along here, when we think about when it is right to use we versus I, are there some like hard and fast, like always remember in this scenario, and that we talked about the resume piece and so forth, but within the workplace, are there some clear, like always use I here or always use we here? Anything that stand out that you can give to our audience?
Yeah, I don't know if there's specific contextual, like we can even back up and rewind a little bit and think about the interview process. Obviously, you're doing a lot more I, but you do want to ask questions of the we, because what if it's not a good fit, right? So thinking about the team, right? So the questions that you may want to ask about the collectiveness of the organization, see, that's embedded within us. So we want to make sure it's a good environment for us, right? So that's one thing to consider is in the interview process, it is about you, but you also want to make sure you're asking questions about the we part of the equation. And then I think in the work setting, performance review conversations, promotions, like anything that has to do with you and the way you're measured, your success metrics, that's when you really have to turn up the I. And I think if you're in a collective brainstorm, if there's each person has a certain part of a work stream, that's obviously when you are part of the group and you want to elicit that as, the starting point. But even in that scenario, I would say there's absolutely an I in team. You need to make sure that you are given credit for your brilliant ideas, because we all come up with brilliant ideas. And oftentimes people sweep in and say they take credit for it, or because we don't know how to speak up in those meetings, other people take credit for something that we brought up 20 minutes ago. So we really want to make sure that we are a part of the team, but also apart from the team.
Yeah, no, that example happens to women disproportionately as well.
Right.
Right. That's, yeah. I'm sure the mansplaining is a very large part of that as well. So yeah. We've got some questions coming in. So Jason Chan asks, do you have any thoughts on personal branding? Is that also something that is more prevalent in Western cultures versus Eastern cultures?
Yeah, I mean, Prag, do you want to start, or do you want me to start with this?
Please go ahead.
Yeah. So I work a lot with companies that have a big Indian presence. So a lot of employees in India. And I notice when I speak to those employees on their personal brand, they're like, well, what do you mean? I'm like, you want to start posting on LinkedIn. You want to be a thought leader in this space. Like whether it's, these are a lot of tech folks that I work with in India, and the thought of having a personal brand, it's almost mind boggling to them, because they're like, well, I'm part of this organization. I want to feel like I'm part of the team or whatever. So yes, I believe from my experiences working with Asian countries, even though the companies are headquartered here in North America, the folks that I work with, like even Salesforce, I do a lot of work with Salesforce, and I have in the past. Like I find that the tech guys and ladies in Hyderabad are very much, it's like personal brand is not sort of part of their vernacular. And so I do think that there are some, we place more emphasis on it in North America. What are your thoughts based on your experience?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, the whole concept or thought of the words personal branding came off to me as being inauthentic to begin with. And it took me a long time to really warm up to it. And I wouldn't even say that I've completely warmed up to it. I totally get the concept and totally agree that it's critical to really think about your personal brand. But I would say, honestly, it's not until I joined SASE in this role that I've really better understood why that's important. And I wouldn't say that I mastered it by any means, but it's not about being inauthentic. It's about, being concerned and being aware of how you show up and in which context, how you show up. And it's not a dirty word, but the branding feels like a dirty word, right? And I think branding as a term in this context might be able to use a rebrand to really land with the Asian community a little bit more.
I love that. So I would love to know what part of personal branding felt inauthentic to you, because I have a different method I use to coach people on personal branding who are Asian. So I can share that with you, but I would love to know, like, what is it that came across as like the inauthentic piece for you?
Yeah. So, coming from Procter & Gamble, where we are very heavily a marketing driven company, marketing as a whole has always felt inauthentic to me, in that you're not letting the product speak for yourself. You're trying to put out all these messages to trick people into why they need whatever it is that you are making. And so it's always felt inauthentic to me to begin with. And then also, as I joined Procter, and who are marketing experts and learning more about what's done and so forth. First off, P&G products are really, really good. But learning more about it and seeing that in action just honestly just gave me and then I went to B school and to try and figure out and understand how business functioned. And the whole thing just gave me the heebie-jeebies. I just didn't care for it. It just felt, it felt like subtle lying the entire way, and versus just telling the truth. That's maybe a character flaw, but that's what comes to my mind. And it's like, yeah, okay, I don't want to, yeah, that's okay. So.
Oh, interesting. Okay. So there's a method I use, and I coach so many people to use this method. It's basically like, consider characteristics or qualities that are really inspiring to you. So let's say it's charisma, let's say it's detail oriented, let's say it's big picture thinking. Those might be 3 qualities at work that you really want to have more of. So from a personal brand perspective, what you want to do is you want to find people that emulate those qualities, right? And then you have it's sort of a open open-ended questions with them. So share with me how you've become so charismatic. And people love to talk about themselves. So if you go to someone and say, hey, can I meet you for 30 minutes? Can we have coffee or Zoom or whatever? I just want to learn from you because I'm new in my career. I'm earlier in my career. And so these are the things I really want to cultivate. And so can you share with me what you do? So this person might share with you that they read XYZ magazine or publication to really be on top of the news, or, you'll find out things that maybe you just didn't even think was related to charisma. So I say you can model that behavior from people that emulate it, that you really respect. And so, there's a lot of Googlers I work with, and I often tell them there's so many people at Google that are so inspiring. So it's like, you don't even have to look external to Google, like look internal, find those 3 people or 4 people that model those characteristics or qualities and go talk to them, because people, again, love to talk about themselves. So if you're giving them a compliment, they're like, okay, great. So then they'll have you, and you're going to learn, like, for a moment, I'll put on Parag's hat and say, Parag's really detail oriented. I want to learn that, and I'll learn from you. So teach me how you are detail oriented, and just leave them very open-ended questions so that you can elicit the information. And it may look very different in your skin, but you're going to learn from someone that you respect and trust. And so personal branding becomes a modeling type of exercise, but it's with your own authentic self involved.
Gotcha. Yeah. No, that makes a ton of sense. It's really, and I like the idea about, being choiceful of who is it that you want to emulate as a role model to begin with, because we do that naturally. It should be intentional.
Right.
But in some cases, if you're not thinking about it, you are unintentionally actually doing that, evaluating how people show up and saying, I'd like to be more like that, or subconsciously. In this case, really what you're saying is bring it to the forefront, be intentional about it, identify what it is that you respect about this person, that person, or whoever on who you want to be. I like that.
And that person can be Asian, or they cannot be Asian. The idea is that you, as the Asian person, are going to take what you learn and you're going to make it work for you. So just think about people you respect, the characteristics and qualities that you want to emulate, and just do 3, because we can't be everything all the time, right? So we want to narrow it down to 3.
3, that's a good point. Odd numbers, I've heard, are also very sticky. So
yes,
not 2 or 4. 3.
Yeah.
That's a great idea.
And I think is it Aristotle? No, it's Socrates. He talks about the triangle and the 3 points, and tell them what you tell them, and then tell them what you just told them, right? So you want to say 3 things 3 different ways 3 times. It sticks in the brain.
Very true. Very, very true. Another question from Rucha. How do you raise a concern when someone is taking credit for your work? Where do you go? Yeah.
So a few things, right? So one is, let's say you're in a meeting and you notice someone just took credit for something that you said, right? So I have this, it's a chapter in my book, it's called Interruption Shields. And essentially these are words or phrases that we use to jump back in the conversation. So it can just be phrases that feel comfortable to you. I'd like to circle back to my point that I raised 10 minutes ago. Again, you're giving yourself you're your own cheerleader. You have to then go back and say, I'd like to circle back, but you're bringing attention to the point that you made, not that Tom made, but that Rucha made, right? Like, so again, it's the language you use, but you want to start feeling more comfortable with these interruption shields. So the ones that I use a lot are, if I may, I'd like to circle back to, may I interject here? And again, depends on the organization and the team. Some can be very formal, some can be informal. But again, you want to draw back to the fact that you are the one that came up with that genius idea. Mm-hmm. And it's going to feel very viscerally uncomfortable at first. And I know, Parag, you were laughing because you probably had that icky reaction when I said that. But again, the reason it feels so icky to all of us is because we weren't raised with that mindset. Right. So we need to start turning up that eye dial here.
I think also your previous advice about being aware and watching who does this well, and right, then emulating that as well. I mean, just even now, if I had, corporate meetings like I used to, I'm right, sure that my mind now is wired to, oh yeah, let me see if I notice anybody kind of using that type of language to come back and so forth.
Right. So, right. Yeah. So again, it's just raising it to our awareness. And now I bet everyone who's on this call, your meetings tomorrow, you will notice the people that are really good at self-advocacy. And this is something that, again, it's a muscle that we want to start flexing and use more.
Yeah. So Sweta asks, how do you keep yourself authentic and bring your values when you were navigating between we and I? How do you feel as you're adjusting that? How did it feel like you were compromising your authentic self or your values, or did you view it a different way to allow you to get over that?
Yeah, I think for me personally, like, so I was born in India and raised in the US, and I very much identify as American, and I very much identify as Indian. So I feel like with me, this dial was the lifesaver in a way, because I was like, I have the beauty of the collective culture. Like, there's so many beautiful things about our culture, right? Like, we are part of this very tight-knit community in a way. We also take care of the elderly in a way that individualistic cultures don't, right? So there are some really beautiful aspects. So I feel like when I sort of thought about this individualism versus collectivism from Hofstede and thought of it as a dial in my mind, it helped me feel like, hey, I'm raising the Indian Neelu here, and on this side, I'm going to raise the American Neelu. And I don't know, it just felt like it worked for me. But again, for everyone, it's how you identify. It's like, even if you primarily identify as Indian or Vietnamese or whatever, it's like knowing that there is a dial, and then in certain situations and settings you can turn up or turn down. It still feels authentic to me, because ultimately it's me and I'm controlling the dial. No one's controlling the dial for me.
Right.
So I don't know if that makes sense to you.
It does. It does. It makes a lot of sense. I thought that's actually a really interesting way to put it, is the American me and the Indian me and so forth. I think also one of the elements that I'd add to that is that behaviors are different than values, right? You're not necessarily compromising your values by using I, and by taking credit where credit is due, when credit is due to you. However, it's more your behaviors come from your values, but it's contextualized according to where you are. And I think also the thinking regarding viewing it more as a behavior and less as a value, less as violating your values, just more as modification of how you show up. And we do this as we grow up and learn how to behave in different contexts, right? Mm-hmm. So I think that often helps with helping folks feel like they are not violating who they are at their core. So I would probably just add that piece.
I love that. That's like a mic drop moment. No, it really is. That hit me in such a profound way, because you're right. It's like, I'm not compromising what I believe is my values in any way. I'm just changing my behavior, because unfortunately, we all have to change our behavior given the context that we're in.
Right.
Like, the way you are with your friends when you're out having a beer is very different than how you are in a meeting at work. And that's just the facts of life, right? So I do like that distinction of behavior versus values.
Yeah. And I can't take credit for that. I'd have to credit Dennis Sarotsu, who is not watching, but he's kind of the godfather of SASE Pro. Many of you know who he is. He's one of my executive advisors at SASE. So yeah, let me credit him in case he's
listening. Yeah. And he's like, not
that he would
my
care.
idea.
Right. Yeah. You'd be like, hey, no, he's also a collectivist. He's Japanese. So
okay.
So you'd be fine with it.
But this actually brings up a very good point, Prag. It's like, we want to be allies for each other. So if you're in a meeting and you notice that there's another Asian person and their ideas got overlooked, you want to say, hey, can we circle back to Susie's initial thought? Because again, we're here to help each other. Otherwise, and it also holds us accountable too, right? So that's the other piece, is like, have an accountability partner. I actually have a friend of mine, and we text each other every time we practice speaking up, whether it's at work, whether it's in a personal setting, right? So if it doesn't feel, in the beginning, when we start doing this, it can feel so uncomfortable. And so even speaking up in personal settings, it's like having an accountability partner it really helps you flex that muscle in a professional setting.
I love that. The accountability partner. Fantastic. That's something that, again, if I was still in a corporate workplace, I think I'd be putting that straight into practice, is finding that person on my work team who can help me ensure that I'm showing up the way that I want to show up.
Right. Absolutely.
So let me grab one of these in the chat. Actually, there's a very long one here. Let me read. Okay. So I absolutely relate to much of what's being discussed. Self-advocacy is something I am definitely working on to thrive in the I as an early career Asian woman. And I appreciate the idea of leaning into the I or the we, depending on the situation. But I wonder if there is a two-way street to collaborate and work together across cultures. What can allies do to support AAPI colleagues and friends with some of these challenges of being raised in the we, but living in the I? So we talked about that a little bit. I don't know if you've got any.
Yeah, I do. I love that. And in fact, many of the workshops that I've been doing this month for AAPI month, we have intentionally invited allies and accomplices to help us, because the thing is, if you're a manager and let's say you're a tall white male, and there's research that indicates that tall white men are in leadership positions. So you're a tall white male, and you may not be aware that these are the struggles of an AAPI professional person on your team. So the onus is on both of you one, for the individual to actually maybe explain to the manager, like, hey, I really struggle with self-advocacy because it's something I just wasn't raised to do, or it's not behavior that was modeled for me. So if I'm in a meeting and I'm not speaking up, can you call on me, right? Like, so you're letting that person know what you need support from, but also raising their awareness and sharing this whole concept of collectivism versus individualism. And it's like in any one-on-one conversation you possibly have on your calendar with your manager, like this might be a 10-minute conversation just to highlight, like, hey, this is something I really struggle with, and I would love to invite you to help me improve in this way. So I think the onus is a two-way street, and feeling comfortable and confident to have that conversation with your manager, the onus is on you to do that.
I love that idea about, going to your manager and talking with them to have them help you with that journey. I heard some input from another trainer on this very similar topic that was really fascinating. Is as you do that, if you find something that you are trying to work on, you're trying to become more vocal, you're trying to become more concise. In my case, my concision is not a word, but concisiveness, brevity.
Yes.
Why can't English be easy, right? But brevity is not one of my talents. And so the point that this other person was making is that when you're working on these items, don't naturally go to your peer who has the exact same challenges, because they're not going to be able to help. Instead, you actually need to go approach somebody who's really good at it. And sometimes that might be someone who is not your best friend on the team, right?
Right.
And engaging them and saying, I would like your assistance. I'm working on so-and-so. I noticed that you do this really well. Can you help me with this? I'm going to practice in our weekly whatever meetings, and I'd love to hear back from you after each meeting. So I'll circle back and get and let me know how I did and how I can whatever do this, that, or the other better, and so forth. So yeah, I think that's another as you mentioned, another great way that allies can show up and really support as we transform ourselves to succeed here.
I remember having a conversation with someone who wasn't, part of AAPI community, and I told her that I struggle in even like communicating what I want. So for example, my partner is not Indian, he's American. And sometimes if he says, hey, let's go to Thai food, I'll just say, sure, even though I don't want Thai food. It's like, I don't want to rock the boat. My mom taught me not to speak up. So it's like, I'll be like, okay, yeah, we'll go to Thai food. And then it's like, now I use him as an accountability partner. I'm like, if I have this look on my face, can you just ask me what I really want? Because then I will tell you I want pizza instead. So it's like, even when we practice in a personal setting, we can take that skill set and take it to a professional setting. And it's something that I still struggle with. I don't want to rock the boat. That is like my DNA is not wanting to rock the boat, but it's like in the space that we're in the culture we live in, we have to rock the boat in some way or in some shape or form at our organizations.
Yeah. Fantastic. I want to pull up another question here. Another one from Jason. Jason, thank you so much. Actually, it looks like Naval Nuclear Labs is in the house today, by the way. I just gave a talk with them yesterday. Apparently, I must have done something right if they all showed up today. So they fantastic. Thank you for coming. So Jason asks, given the collectivism of Asian culture, why is it that Asians tend to underemphasize interpersonal skills, relationship building, and networking at work? So given the collectivism, why do we underemphasize it? And it's so different than what we see in Asian social circles. Any thoughts around that? I've actually wondered the exact same thing. Is, we're all so loud and boisterous when we're in our family units, right? I mean, in an Indian family unit, I know you can't get a word in. I've heard the same in other East Asian cultures as well.
Yeah.
But boy, you go into the conference room and the dynamic is totally different. Any thoughts around that?
Yeah, I mean, so the other thing that I've talked about and it's from Hofstede's cultural dimensions, one of the other dimensions is power differential. So what happens is in Asian countries, it's not common to just go into the boss's office and just walk in and say, hey, I got to ask you something. Whereas here we do that. So if we think about just our deference to authority, it might feel uncomfortable to speak up in a room where there's the partner of the organization and then there's you as an analyst or a consultant. So there might be some of that going on. I mean, I don't know for sure. There's no research on this. There is sort of the fact that in Asian and collective cultures, there's a huge power distance versus in individual cultures, there's little power difference. And so there could be something going on, an internal dialogue about, this person's way senior. Do they even care? Is it even respectful if I say this, if I share my opinion, which is different than their opinion, right? So there could be some of that going on. But I wonder for you, Parag, like, what are your thoughts on that?
I think that's a fascinating example or fascinating explanation that you could, and I think you're exactly right. It is absolutely the power dynamic that's within the room, because Asians at work in a circle who are colleagues, yeah, I'm pretty sure I think we have the same problem of getting people to shut up, but as soon as you have a senior leader in the room, inherently, even if it's an Asian senior leader in the room, the dynamic changes.
The dynamic absolutely changes. Yeah. And even if you think about it in our social circles, like let's just think about our family unit. Like I'm Punjabi. I come from a very loud, boisterous Punjabi family. It's like if my dad's being boisterous, nobody says anything until, you let him, you give him the stage, you give him the mic because there's a power difference, right? So I feel like if we're with our colleagues who are Asian, it's different. We're all in the same sort of power dimension, if you will. But if you add this element of power difference, it makes us quieter in these conference rooms, I think.
I think you're right. So I want to hop to one of the topics that we talked about in advance. How our parents raised us, right? And, specifically you were talking about how you didn't receive compliments growing up, and what that impact that had on you. And I know certainly there, that's pretty prevalent across culture, across Asian cultures as well. So what's been the impact? What impact have you seen by not receiving compliments on your own life as well as within your research and so forth? What happens?
Well, I mean, I think this is across the board with collective cultures and Asian parents in general, is that they don't say like verbally, like, hey, you know what, I'm so proud of you. Like you'll never hear those words. You might feel it in actions. Like my parents never said, hey, we're so proud of you. You just graduated from Columbia, but they did help me pay off my student debt. So again, there was actions, but there wasn't that verbal affirmation. So I think what happens is, and again, there's no right or wrong. I'm not pointing fingers. They just modeled the behavior that they know. Right. But I feel like because of that, it's more and more important for us to be our own cheerleader because we never really got that before. So what I used to do is I was so uncomfortable receiving a compliment because I'd never really gotten compliments. So if someone said to me, you know what, I like your shirt, I would say, oh, you know what, Parag, I love your yellow shirt. It's amazing. Like I couldn't even sit with the compliment. So I think that was part one, is actually letting that compliment like marinate and just taking it in and appreciating it and just taking it in. I think that's step one. And I think step two is to start complimenting yourself. Even small wins, because ultimately, the way we define success is very different from an Asian mindset, right? Like I think, Parag, you were telling me about the story about getting a 95 on test and your parents, their reaction was, well, what happened to the 5 points? Like you must get 100. So when you have that as your barometer for success, it's really hard for you to even give yourself those accolades or compliments. So I think the impact is really that, you do a great job and you just kind of sweep it under the rug, or you don't even give yourself credit for it. And I think ultimately that can materialize into imposter syndrome because you just never really take moments to acknowledge the success that you've had.
Oh, I like that. The imposter syndrome piece as well, because if you have that high expectation of perfection, even in what you are already an expert at, then that being the bar, and hopping into a new role, a different division, a different whatever type of work and so forth, looking at the job requirements for something you want to apply for and seeing that you don't match up with everything. If you've already got this crazy high bar, and that's the expectation that you have for yourself because mom and dad had that for you.
Right.
Now, stepping into it, you've got imposter syndrome again, because you're expecting yourself to be at 150% from day one.
Right. Absolutely. And then also just to the point of like, we have these unrealistic expectations of success. And so, we really want to start reframing success the way we as Asians define success as sort of like, I wrote it down. It's a succession of small events, right? So we want to start thinking about these small wins, because that's going to actually help us to dealing with the imposter syndrome. It's going to help us start applying for those jobs that maybe we don't meet 100% of the criteria, but we've done so many other things. And we need to start giving ourselves credit for those other things as well.
So how do you practice this, or do you practice this? I apologize for putting you in the spot if you don't, but do you practice this in your daily life or weekly life or whatever, on giving yourself compliments or affirmations, or like, what works for you?
Well, it varies. I try different things, because I used to stand in the mirror and say, "You're awesome." And that didn't really work. I didn't buy it. I was like, "You still suck." You still suck at this. But no, what really works for me is giving myself some sort of treat. So if I do something and I think I did a great job, I'd say, "Oh, you know what? I deserve a break. I can go take a walk. I can take my afternoon off," or, like small wins to really give myself that moment of like, "Hey, I'm so proud of you." So being proud of myself might be like, "Hey, I'm going to go get a massage," or "I'm going to go meet a friend for lunch," versus staying at home and eating lunch. So those are the ways that I sort of like reward myself. And that helps me celebrate these wins and successes. But those verbal affirmations, I mean, before I get on any workshop or whatever, I do have some things that I do. So again, it's like to motivate me to do a great job. But I think we should all play around with rewarding ourselves in whatever way that looks like. And also just taking a moment and saying, "You know what, you just did a really good job. Like, good job, Parag. This was an amazing workshop or fireside chat. Like, great job hosting it." Like give yourself a compliment and then reward yourself, whatever that reward looks like. It's very different for each of us. So what would a reward be for you? Like what would be something you would reward yourself with?
I don't think I'd do a great job of this, to be honest, Neelu. I don't think I'd do a great job. And Jessica's probably like nodding her head furiously right now. Quite honestly, she and Megan both are like, "Parag, this is great. Stop." So they tell me this because I still have that expectation of perfection.
Right.
I still hold myself to that standard and the organization that I work with, to be honest. So I wouldn't say that I do this very well at all. However, I think, I need to unlearn the perfectionism. I totally agree with you there. Dang it, I forgot what my point was going to be. It'll come to me as soon as we finish.
Yeah, I know.
That's that
you don't do a good job of rewarding yourself.
No, I don't. And I agree with you. The whole affirmation thing in the mirror, in what comes to me, and I'm of a certain age, Stuart Smalley in the SNL, Phil Hartman, I think it was Phil Hartman in the SNL skit, giving daily affirmations to himself. That's what reminds me of it. And it's like, that's not going to happen.
That's not going to work for you.
That's not going to work for me. Oh, I remember now.
Yes.
What I found is that every year at Proctor, we had to do our work plan review. We were systematic at it. And so every month or so, I would write down all the accomplishments so that at the end of the year, when I have to write this thing, I'm not racking my brain. And during that time, for the 20 years I worked at Proctor, this is terrible career advice, by the way, folks. I never floated a resume because I had zero desire to leave. Mm-hmm. But every once in a while, I would update my resume. And what I found is that by doing that and forcing myself to figure out what the numbers are of what I delivered, then I was just like, oh, holy cow. I did an awful lot. And so I actually used that work plan process to make it clear to myself of what I uniquely delivered, even in advance of when I actually needed to hand that document over. So
I really like that. I think that's a great way to, even if you don't plan on leaving your organization, update your resume. That'll get you in the mode of like, hey, what did I really do? What were my accomplishments? What was my part of this pie or puzzle?
Right. And even now it's even easier with LinkedIn. You can do it on the fly. And it's important. it's important anyway, because LinkedIn is used for so many different reasons nowadays. And actually, I think I did this just a month ago or so, realized maybe I didn't, I don't remember, but my own LinkedIn currently is just like, okay, in the 3 years that I've been with SASE, what have I delivered? What have I actually, have I updated it? And now I need to go double check. So,
yeah. Yeah.
So
mention all of your wonderful accomplishments at SASE.
Co-hosted fantastic fireside chat with Neelu Kaur. That's going to be bullet point number 1, Neelu.
Yeah.
I want to go to this this question from, I apologize, I don't know if it's V or Vi. How do we practice confrontation skills when working with others from a strong I culture, and they have strong and loud personalities? Do you have any tips in that type of scenario?
Yeah, I mean, so the question is, how do we practice confrontation skills when working with others from the I culture who have strong loud? Yes, those interruption skills are what helped me. So like if there's the loudest voice in the room is always speaking, I will say, and I have a valid like point that I want people to hear. Can we circle back because I have something to share? Or, may I interject here, right? Like those are words to really get into sort of the loudest voice in the room speaks up. So that's something that a strategy I use all the time. Parag, what do you use?
No, I am different in the fact that I've never been shy I've never backed down to a fault. To a fault. My colleagues are nodding their head violently right now and getting whiplash. But yes, yeah. I don't back down to a fault. And in fact, I would say that element of lack of self-awareness and personal branding was actually career limiting for me at Procter. So I think I had the opposite problem. so
where
I'm a bad example there.
You felt comfortable sharing your thoughts and
yeah, to a fault. Yeah. And so on the flip side, the having the awareness of how you show up and how you want to show up, because the two are not the same, right? What your self-image is and others' perception, marrying those two up and being aware of both, critically important for career success, right?
And I think just the awareness, like you're saying, okay, I didn't have that challenge, and maybe I didn't have that challenge because I'm a boy and I was raised by an Indian mom who revered the boy and downplayed the daughter, because I can relate to that. So it's like having that awareness, you're like, okay, so now I'm going to help those that it doesn't come that easy for them. So if you're in a conference room, you're in a meeting and you see there's an Asian woman that's struggling, you can say, okay, I know why she's struggling. So I'm going to speak up and have her thread her into the conversation.
No, very true.
And that's allyship there too. But I wanted to make a note of Jonas, his comment. I noticed that Neelu referred to her colleague as American, assuming white Caucasian. I do that as well. Why do we do that, as we are assuming American means white, which implies others are not true American? Absolutely true. I mean, I've been in the US since 2 years old, and I still say, like, if someone says, where are you from? And I say, I'm American, they're like, no, where are you really from? So I think it's me having conditioning of that. Yeah. So I agree with you, Jonas. I think it is labels. And I think I've been questioned so much when I say I'm American. They're like, no, you're definitely not American. And I'm like, I am. And I'm Indian. I was born in India. But like, so I feel like that people ask less if you look Caucasian or you are white in some way, like you can pass or adjacent to Caucasian. Like, the question is not asked as much.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Language matters, and we're not helping ourselves in that fashion. So Jonas, thanks for noting that, and either advertently or inadvertently calling us out, because you're exactly right. I do this thing all the time, and we need to be better at that. We need to absolutely be better at that. So I love this question from Travis. Have y'all, my apologies, I am Southern as well. So have y'all experienced and have y'all had any experience with context being assumed to be younger based off of appearances? For Asian Americans, lots of us, not myself, but the rest of us look a lot younger than we actually are, and may not have come across as, having the wealth and depth of experience as we do. And I forgot what you call them, like information shields. What did you call it again?
Interruption
shields. Any interruption shields or tips or tricks or words that you've used to kind of say that and remind people that, hey, you know what you're talking about?
I say there, it's contextual, right? So in some contexts, looking younger is absolutely beneficial for me. Like I go into facilitate, and if I'm in the tech industry, it's really beneficial if they think I'm a millennial, because then it's like, hey, she's relatable. And I actually believe I'm a millennial, even though I'm, whatever. But I feel like I have the millennial mindset. But anyways, no, the point is, in those contexts, it's really helpful for me to sort of blend in to that audience, right? But if I'm being questioned about my credentials in any way, I can actually say, you know what, I have 15 years of experience facilitating and coaching. So I will bring up the numbers when, in fact, it feels like I'm being dismissed or discounted or my credentials are being questioned. So I think, again, it's like leveraging that dial, knowing when to turn up the youthfulness, or when you have to step into sort of your wise sage wisdom that you've accumulated with some years under your belt. But I think you control the dial, so you can turn it up or turn it down. But I love that question, and I think it's beneficial in some contexts, and it can help you in some contexts, and it can be harmful. So if it's harmful, think of words or phrases that you can use. And for me, I always go back to credentials. I'll say, well, actually, I graduated from Columbia in 2009. I've been doing this, so I'll just keep going back to numbers and dates.
Yeah. Finding those dates and the number of years. I was in so-and-so location back in 2003 working on and letting them do the math themselves and so forth. Yeah. So I grew bald at a very young age, and so I haven't had this challenge. I haven't had this challenge at all. And now actually, growing a beard that actively shows gray. Maybe I'm trying to do the opposite. Maybe I'm trying to become project as though I am older than I am, so that people take me more seriously as a sage. I don't know.
Yeah.
But no, I haven't had that challenge. So.
No, but again, it can work to your advantage. It could work to your disadvantage. I remember the other day I was on an interview and someone said, well, you wouldn't know about September 11th. And I'm like, of course I know. I know exactly where I was. I know exactly what street I was on. So it was almost like implied that you have no clue because you were probably really young or like a baby. I'm like, no, I was a full-on adult. So right. Yeah. So it's like, but again, in that context, I did not say anything because it was advantageous for me just to go with the flow.
Yeah. Fantastic. So Neelu, believe it or not, we are at the top of the hour, bottom of the hour, right? That's the right word. Top of the hour means beginning. Bottom of the hour. We're at the bottom of the hour. We are coming to a close here. So any final thought before I steal the screen away from you?
I think, continue practicing the dial and know that you control the we and the I, and you can dance between the two. And if it feels really viscerally uncomfortable, just start practicing with small baby steps.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that, Neelu. Folks, this has been a fantastic hour with Neelu and with you all. So thank you so much for your time. Jessica's going to pop up a poll for you. Jessica, if you can go ahead, there we go. There are 3 questions in this. I know that's asking a lot. They are multiple choice though, thankfully. So rate us 1 through 10 on the 3 different questions. You have to scroll down to answer all 3 before you can hit submit. So please do that. We use this feedback to let Neelu know how wonderful of a job she's done today. So with that as well, I want to just share a couple more pieces of information. Whoops, that is not the one I wanted to share. The next program that we have coming up with availability is our Top Gun Leadership Academy. This is Nikhil Paul, not Tom Cruise. It's an 8-week intensive leadership training program for new managers of Asian heritage. We completed one program back earlier this year with fantastic reviews. We still have a few pods of 4 individuals, so 8 spots total available for our next group that will start in late June 23rd through August 18th. If you are interested in this program, please reach out to me, and I'm happy to share more details along with other information. Our executive presence program, this is a 5-week cohort that starts this Friday. Unfortunately, it is sold out. However, we run this every year. We've run it twice in the last 2 years. This year, we're only doing once. The 5th time it's sold out. Fantastic program, really focused more on high potential middle managers. We're really looking to break into senior leadership. So for folks who are with 10 plus some years experience on their belt. So if you are interested in this in the future, reach out and I can get you on the short list for the next time we offer it. And our big event every year is our national conference this fall in Atlanta. This will be a 3-day event for professionals. We'll have awards programs. We'll have 10 plus trainers. We'll have 20, 30 plus workshops, 50 plus senior Asian executives, and we're expecting to have well over 600 Asian STEM professionals. Registration will open at the very beginning of July. You can purchase bulk packs of registrations now. Just reach out to me and I will let you know. We can also share lots of information from prior events as well. And with that, follow us on the web. You can go to our website. You can follow us on LinkedIn. LinkedIn, we post 3 to 4 times a week. And reach out to me at pro@saseconnect.org if you have any questions or want to get your Asian ERG engaged with us. With that, I close. Thank you so much for your time. Neelu, thank you so much for participating with us today.
Thank you all. And please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. And if you have any questions, I will respond and forward you on to someone if I can't help you.
Perfect. Thanks, everybody.
Bye, everyone.